Aloha, my name is Anna Covert, and I'm coming to you from my battleship here on the beautiful island of Oahu. This week on the Covert Code, the topic is the future of marketing is multicultural. And my special guest is Joycelyn David, CEO, cultural marketing strategist, keynote speaker, and author of the Amazon bestselling book, The Multicultural Mindset, Driving Business Growth in a Borderless Era. As founder of AVC and one of FWN's most influential Filipina in the world, Joycelyn's here to share how cultural intelligence unlocks growth, elevates leadership, and drives business global success. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
So to kick us off and get the party started, can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey and how you got to be such an amazing person that you are today?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I mean, my story as a Filipina growing up in Canada starts really with that. I was the only Filipina in my class. I was the only Filipina in my classroom. I was the only Filipina often in boardrooms as well. And so, after a career in corporate marketing, I spent 20 years doing corporate marketing, doing amazing work for global companies, Canadian companies, as well as in the US. I think I had a midlife crisis, Anna. When I turned 40, I decided that I needed a change, and I quit my job, got my first tattoo, and then moved across the country and bought a company. And that's how I became an entrepreneur at the tender age of 40. But my story doesn't really end there. I like to say that my story begins at 40 when I got that tattoo and moved across the country and bought a company. I was taking with me all of the experiences of being a Filipina Canadian in corporate marketing to now building a culture with the two companies that I now have. And so that is kind of my story in a nutshell, but there's so many wonderful things I can share in between. But it started with a midlife crisis, Anna.
Oh, and I have to know what it was your tattoo of?
So because I'm Filipina, I love the national flower of the Philippines. So on my back, I have three buds and a vine of the sampaguita, which is the national flower of the Philippines, symbolizing my family. Um, three buds, each for the loves of my life, my family.
Oh, that's beautiful. Wow. So, I got a question for you before we dive into your book, which I want to hear a lot about. So now you're in Canada and you're working with Filipinos. Are you working with Filipino marketing actually in the Philippines, or is it really more, transplants? And
Oh, yeah, no, great question. I would say I'm global marketing in terms of the services that we offer. When I was in corporate marketing, we were doing corporate marketing globally. I was the go to market lead for a large public company, and we were doing marketing to consumers in North America, Asia, Europe, Latin America. And it really required cultural fluency to be able to understand local markets and obviously bring a corporate way of going to market, but not necessarily, trying to shove one size fits all into localization of markets. And so that's what I did for a long time. And now, as an agency, a multicultural marketing agency, we're based in Canada and we help brands who want to connect with diverse multicultural consumers all over the world. So, in fact, we have a lot of clients in Asia, in Europe, in the US, and Canada. And because the world is borderless, which is the theme of my book, a lot of brands come to us because they recognize people move, culture moves, and brands move across borders at the pace of technology and now social media. And they want agencies who can help keep up with that and who have cultural fluency. So, our specialty as an agency is cross border multicultural marketing, but it's really what I've always been doing as a Canadian working in this international global market. So that's kind of what differentiates us. And while I am Filipina in terms of my background, I'll also say that, culture is not homogenous, right? So I grew up in Canada, a Filipina Canadian, and I'm sure there's Filipinos in Hawaii. Oh, and in the Philippines who all identify as Filipino, but are very different culturally. And I like to say that, culture goes deeper than skin color. It goes deeper than ethnicity. And those are some of the things that we help brands unpack. Because unfortunately, a lot of brands especially those in the United States today, where DEI is a four-letter word and diversity is stricken out from websites today. It's a challenging time to have conversations about race and identity anywhere in the world. And I hope my book invites and sparks more conversations to not shy away from that conversation. And that's really the root of all of that for me.
No, I can tell you, I mean, I really resonate with that because one of the biggest things we see, I'm not originally from Hawaii, but I've been here for 20 years. And I've also helped brands try to break into the market because they make the big mistake of thinking that it's cookie cutter. Oh, it's just another place in America. And we really don't think of ourselves as that way here in Hawaii. We call it the mainland for a reason, right? And, we see time and time again, companies come in here with their same copy or even I did some branding for Wet and Wild, and they're owned by Village Roadshow in Australia. And I'll never forget when they were really controlling about their creative. And I came into the office. This is when I worked at my first agency. I started my first company or agency at 28. But I was working at an agency and I come in and I'm drinking coffee and I'm reading the script. And it starts off with "Attention all extreme Hawaiians" as the opening. And I like spit the coffee out like all over I'm like, oh my God, like we're gonna have rioting down at the park. But I'm like, what they meant is Kama'aina, which means locals, right? So it's just those one words, can really make or break a campaign. And I think it's people really discount that. So I'm excited.
Oh, yeah, no, and I can't tell you how often I see brands make mistakes, much like that, and how sometimes they don't have an agency or an expert like you who could catch that and correct it and fix it to the degree that they aren't embarrassed or get canceled. And I've seen brands make terrible mistakes because they, one, didn't have diversity at the table, two, didn't think to ask someone from the community because they weren't included as part of the process or part of development of the campaign. And inclusion for me starts at the beginning all the way through to execution of any campaign for the community with the community kind of thing, Anna. And then if they don't have that, then for gosh sakes, hire the expertise around the table. And that's why agencies probably like mine and probably like yours in the past are so valuable in the ecosystem where brands have brand think and they need to not think that way. They need to think with culture and community in mind. And that's what I love about what I do. Every day is a new day to learn something new and help a brand connect authentically.
Yeah, and then, I'm interested about your opinion. So now with because before we used to spend a lot of money, especially here in Hawaii, with getting someone local to translate copy, right? New websites and now with AI and the motion toward you can use a plugin, it always makes me very nervous, like. But with scale and the ability to really get out there fast, how do you manage that kind of risk?
Yeah, the tools available right now, Anna, right? You can literally have a platform translate live while we're in a Zoom or on a Google call. But nuance is one of the things that isn't easily translatable. And one of the things I'm a proponent of is supporting diverse data that is fed into the AI models that are being perpetuated today. And one of the first things I did with Discord, which is like one of the early generative creative tools out there, was I typed in, of course, show me a Filipino woman.
Oh,
And I typed it in and I said, okay, this AI tool, show me what a Filipino woman looks like. And it was not a Filipino woman. I'll say what it there if I have her. It was not a Filipino woman, like not even close. But a year later, I tried the same prompt into another tool and it was, I guess, maybe a little bit closer, but it had shown, maybe some stereotypical Filipina attire now that was maybe, the symbology that was reflected, because it still wasn't correct. So imagery is challenging and words are just as challenging. In the example that you gave, there are some words I'm sure in the local dialect in Hawaii that don't have a direct translation in English, and other languages have the same thing. So what we tell our clients who will sometimes say, well, we could just use Google Translate. We don't need to use an agency to do the translation anymore. I said, you know what? That is absolutely correct. But what I would suggest is that you still utilize human-based testing and community-based testing as a quality assurance check before you go to market. So production can be automated, cool, if that helps you save money, but please don't skip the quality assurance check. Because if I guarantee you, you give one word to five translators, they'll give you five different words or five different ways. And that nuance isn't coded because of the lack of diverse data in those AI tools that exist today. So when clients challenge me with that, I'll usually be the first to say, "Go, give it a try, but please let my team audit it. And if you ever have an issue, you can always come back to us." And 90% of the time, brands need to protect reputation and mitigate brand risk. They don't want to take a chance. So all of my clients, at least my large enterprise ones, have always been safe, have never had a bad headline. And those who have had bad headlines are usually the ones who rely only on the tool.
And then you have to ask yourself if they're spending all this money on this brand launch, like why are they missing this one part? And it brings me to another topic that I see clients make a lot of mistake is social media. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna let the intern manage it." I'm like, that is exactly this is your front of line communication with your customer. And that's where we've seen, right? Both of us, I'm sure, have seen big brands fall really short. Like, the Coca-Cola example where they had Russia and they had added Kyrgyzstan Stein in there. And I mean, people were dumping Coke down toilet, urinals and just, things like that. Right. And of course, I'm sure that wasn't done by an intern, but still it's, I think it's one of the more important things because it can go bad quickly.
It can. And I'll give you an example. So one of the case studies I share in the book talks about H&M Canada. It was one of our clients. And they had a general manager who at the time was a European, national who was working in Canada, but he had worked in China previously. So when he came to Canada and he was working with his marketing team, he realized and he noticed that there's this huge opportunity of 1.7 million Chinese Canadian shoppers that they were not connecting with as a brand. So they came to us and said, "We'd like to launch an official WeChat social media account." And it was the first of its kind for any, retail brand in Canada to have an owned WeChat
Wow.
social media account in Canada, especially in today's environment, or even then, that environment back then, it was not normal. It was really innovative, but it was not seen as innovative because this general manager and their marketing director had cultural fluency. They had a multicultural mindset because they had worked and lived in multiple countries and they knew the importance of WeChat as the super app for simplified Chinese Mandarin speakers in the world, period. So for the brand, it became a case study and they grew from zero to over 100,000 followers in less than a year, a stellar rise for any retail brand. And from a social media perspective, they had more engagement, more followers on WeChat, a Chinese language social media app in Canada, than they had on their English language social media on mainstream channels in Canada with all other audiences. So the engagement rate was more than double. The follower rate of growth month over month in terms of monthly active users was like astronomically high. And at the end of the whole thing, we all looked at it like, of course this worked because for the community, you go where the community, you engage with the community on the platforms that they trust, in this case, WeChat, it's a no brainer. The problem becomes with other social media platforms now, Anna, and there's so many out there.
Yes.
Consumers have so much choice, right? I can spend my time on this one or that one. And of course, there's demographic differences. And I think the challenges for brands is they don't know about platforms like WeChat that even exist. And for me, that's the gap that I'm trying to fill is, not all consumers think in English, and in the case of this H&M case study, for their customers, they spent 6 hours a day on WeChat and then 30 minutes a day on Instagram. And so why wouldn't you go to where your customers are? And that's the message I like to give brands is you don't need to fight for attention on social media platforms if you just know where they are. And sometimes that means looking outside of your purview and looking outside of what might seem normal for the brands. And WeChat was not normal at the time, but it was a huge success case study for us as an agency, but also for the brand.
Wow, I love that example. And it's so true. It's like what lens are you looking through? And there are so many of these underserved audiences that people just don't even think about, you know?
Yeah.
So let's segue to your book a little bit. Tell me, why now? What was your motivation behind writing the book, and how did the process go for you?
Yeah, thank you. The process was a journey. I was not actually looking to write a book, Anna. Let's be honest. Last time I wrote any long form anything was my master's thesis in 1999, and it was painful. Painful. The idea of writing anything long form was very painful to me. But Forbes and Advantage Books reached out. I remember it was Thanksgiving 2023. And their pitch was very simple. They said, "We like you. We're looking for new voices and diverse authors. Would you like to write a book?" And I hadn't contemplated ever writing my own book. I didn't know the process or the journey, but I knew I had a body of knowledge and things to say. So I asked them a couple questions, and the journey became down to signing the agreement. I asked them one last question. And the question was, "Have you ever published a Filipina author before?" And I said, "Go answer that question for me. Go look at your database, look at your authors, look at the backgrounds." And I thought that'll take them a while, but it didn't. They came back in like a week and they said, "Actually, we have one other Filipino author in development. She hasn't signed yet in America, in the USA, but you would be the first Filipina Canadian,
Oh.
period." And I was like, "Oh, well, then I have to do this.
Yeah, right?
I have to do this." Well, I had a principle I signed, and the book idea came from the insight that as a woman of color growing up in Canada, working for global companies, I would often mentor young women, and I would get asked the same question, Anna. How did you get here? Like, what did you do? Like, what did you study? What did you do to break into the boardroom, to break the glass ceiling? What did you do? And I always found myself answering basically the same version of an answer, which was it wasn't anything I did. It was my mindset on how I approached my own growth and dealing with people, which was being able to work across cultures, being able to be diplomatic, being able to understand cross cultural styles, because that was very inherent to me growing up in Canada. But I didn't realize until later in life that that was pretty unique when you start looking at it in the world. And so that became the book, The Multicultural Mindset, which is my answer to a younger generation, to my son's generation who's coming up, that if you want to succeed in this global borderless world, which we are all a part of, whether we like it or not, having a mindset like this will help teach tolerance, understanding, and I hope create better businesses, employees, and people in a time when maybe we need it more. And I wrote the book over a year ago, Anna, and I didn't realize that today in 2025 that this topic would be so top of mind for us.
Wow. And so did you have to change any of the book because of the changes of the of policy, or would this kind of fit even more?
Oh, it fit even more. In fact, when the inauguration happened for Trump's second term, he, in his inauguration speech, made some comments about, America needs to be colorblind, and that I started rewriting my introduction after the speech, and if anything, it fueled me even more to have even more say about why this was even more important. And talking with the publishers, they asked me, like, this is, potentially, topics that may not be friendly to talk to people about. Are you ready for this? And I said, hell yeah, I'm ready for it now. I've had a year to prepare, and I've had a year to write and to flesh out my ideas. And if there's any time to talk about it, it's now, actually. And um, I'm really happy with the end product, but I'm even more surprised at the reception. It hit number one in several categories within the first 3 weeks. And the publishers even said, like, this is above average. And I said, well, I have no baseline. This is my first book. I have no expectation. And also the reviews. I've gotten amazing, totally candid reviews from Americans and Canadians and people in the EU and Australia who've all said versions of the same, which is this is something that everyone should know when they're young before they get into the workplace. Or thank you for helping me to understand this perspective that I didn't know as a white woman growing up in the United States. And thank you for sharing it an approachable and practical way. So all the reviews have been heartwarming, but more importantly, I feel like, wow, uh, that first book, not so bad. Maybe maybe I'll write another one with that.
Great.
Maybe.
Sounds like there's another one coming up.
Oh, we'll see. Actually, the last chapter talks about the intersection of AI. And so I talk about the intersection of the multicultural era and the AI era, and how great thinkers like Maria Ressa, who I admire greatly. Maria Ressa is a Filipina journalist who founded Rappler. She won a similar award to me. It was named one of the most influential Filipinas in the world. Like, I'm right up there with Maria Ressa. She won the Nobel Peace Prize, Anna.
Wow.
That's freaking amazing.
That's
But
amazing.
she writes about the importance of governance and free speech and how to stand up to dictators as she experienced in the Philippines, which mirror what may be happening or is happening today in the United States. And so I wrote about it a year ago, and the book is now out, and some of these thoughts are now resonating. And I think that's why if I was going to write a book, I couldn't have picked a better time to release it. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm very proud to say that the first Filipina Canadian to ever be published um, still has a lot to say.
Well, I am cheering for you. This is very exciting. So tell us, what is one of the, I mean, all like we want to read a, I want to read a book. We got to do a book swap if you're open to it. So,
Oh, absolutely.
and I'll read yours. We can talk about them. But what is one of those, sort of for all of our listeners, what's one thing that they can all start to do today to start changing their mindset?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. The important thing that I write about is about having a framework in which to practically, um, what I say, assess where you're at. Like, nobody is born with cultural intelligence, right? Like, it needs to be learned. And so how to learn it is the framework that I outline. And it's very practical, increasing your knowledge and your immersion. And there's an axis, right, of how you can increase your knowledge and how you can increase your immersion. And knowledge can be everything from learning more about other cultures to reading and consuming content. But that access, while surface level, can only go so far, right? Like, I can learn and look at the Maldives on Google Maps as much as I can, but it will never replace the immersion that I could feel if I went to the Maldives or to the beautiful Big Island as you live on. And so culture, yeah, exactly. I mean, look at that backdrop. Oh my gosh, Anna. So for me, practical things that people can do, whether it's across an ocean or across the street, is find ways to amplify your immersion and cultural experiences outside of your sense of normal. And as a Filipina growing up in Canada, I had all Filipino friends. I went to an Filipino church and I spoke Filipino at home, although I learned it my parents, that's another side story. They didn't want me to have an accent, so they didn't teach me Filipino at home, but I picked it up later. So all of these things are practical ways to increase your fluency, but it requires that you push yourself out of your comfort zone and that you actually get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So, for example, would I, as a Filipino woman, actively seek an opportunity to go to, I don't know, a Sikh New Year festival? Probably not. But
I was like, yeah, sounds great.
but that's probably why, but that's probably why, you know, that's probably why my fluency is high is because I have experienced that. And I learned the hard way through participation and through learning about the respect of that culture from an insider in that community, how to better understand it. And that immersion cannot be done online. That immersion cannot be done scrolling or swiping or liking. And that's the whole premise of the framework that I build, which is you can increase your knowledge, but your immersion of experiences is vital. And that is, in a way, a renaissance and a return back to in-person and in real life interaction,
Yeah.
which in the age of AI, it's actually going the opposite, Anna, where you don't need to ask a person a question anymore. You can just ask an AI for that. And if I were to, like in that example of experiencing Sikh New Year for the first time, there's no way an AI prompt could give me the same level of cultural fluency as my experience for half a day in that festival did. And that's the model that I put forward in the book. And I'm trying to encourage young people and businesses and organizations to not put too much emphasis on the easy to get, likable, clickable knowledge base, but to really prioritize the immersion, and the immersion that requires to slow down and to take time to connect with people and to better understand the layers of culture, as opposed to the surface level information that is easy to get, but not necessarily depth of knowledge. So those are some of the things that I share in the book.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I was really lucky. My father owned a travel agency when I was young. My mom,
Oh.
he was originally from New York, but and I grew up in Colorado, but I was able to travel all over the world. And those are really those memories that, really, they say you can give a kid a toy, but an experience, getting to experience something new is really what sticks. And those are the things that are so much more meaningful. And so that brings me to my next thought. I know a lot of people out there like, oh, but I can't afford to travel, or there's some other ways that you could be immersed, right? Even at your own business, like by having like a lunch and learn. If there's someone who's Filipina, they could bring in Filipino food. I mean, like, doesn't have to be, you could kind of baby step into it, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the examples I share is like, if you can't travel across an ocean or across a country, just travel across the street and start there. And it starts with the intent to want to learn and know more about a community outside of your own. So, as an example, for AVC, we're a multicultural agency. We have about 35, 40 full-time staff, and we speak about 12 languages amongst all of us. And for many of them, cultural immersion, being newcomers or immigrants to Canada, they've only known their culture. So I'm from this country and I come here and I'm now in a multicultural society, but they don't necessarily know what is Diwali? What is what is Eid? Like what is what is it? What do they call it? Oh, Ramadan. Sorry, there's an alarm going off. One
Oh,
second.
okay, hold on a second. We can.
So sorry. You can okay, edit it out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's off.
But it's not like a fire alarm or anything that you have to get up.
No. It went off and sorry, I
He's
see.
like, that feels bad.
I'll be back. I'll go back to the cultural immersion story. So at ABC, we actually implement cultural immersion days for all of our staff. Our staff who are diverse, who represent different countries, who speak different languages, and often the immersion is beneficial from a learning and education perspective, but it also helps to foster more respect and understanding with teammates as well. And I like to say that I'd like to believe that it sticks, but it's the repeated effort of me as an employer to demonstrate openness and fostering understanding that I think is why, as a company, we have over 95% retention. We have a huge like net promoter score, client satisfaction scores, and we have a double-digit growing business for the last 5 years that has grown over 5x. So all those financial aspects are rooted in this culture of creating a safe place of cultural understanding where everyone is welcome. So I make the argument that if you start there, the business growth will follow. And I hope that that's the use case that other companies will also see
I'm
by
sure it is. And have you dappled with the multiverse?
I have.
'Cause I think that is something that I was just amazed, because I specialize in digital advertising, and I'm like, "We need to get in, like, with the team, like, we need to get into this, we just need to start making some multiverse, creations," you know? So I got, my boyfriend got me the goggles, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, and it just made me think that maybe immersion, could be something that could be easier to access with some of those tools.
Absolutely. Technology takes it to another level. In fact, I know a founder of a startup company who took it even further. He took virtual reality technology with the use of augmented reality and virtual reality to help senior citizens who couldn't travel anymore to experience travel and like the experience of walking down the path in their village
Huh.
where they grew up, but they're physically bound and unable to travel at the age of 90, but could still travel through technology. So for me, that use case of technology, helping, let's say, seniors is wonderful, but even more so to be able to experience and see. But it still doesn't replace the human interaction. Like I know maybe I'm sounding old, maybe I'm being a little old school, where it's like, no, no, you can't just talk to your friend Google or your friend Sora. You do need to have a real friend that you can play for real. But I do believe that I hope there is a renaissance to that valuing of IRL. I call it in real lifetime, because when the world is moving so fast and the expectations for speed and knowledge and ability to keep up with that just keep growing. I don't see that necessarily stopping, right? I believe there'll be more value placed on, which meetings you do have in person, which meetings you do prioritize your in real life time. And that'll become more valuable for companies and employees to also prioritize for their own development. Because if you don't, then I really do believe that the companies of tomorrow that have a multicultural mindset are the ones that will hire better, will retain better, and will attract customers of tomorrow. Period.
I agree with you. Like, what do you think? What do you think's next in terms of what trends are existing that you're seeing the business should be aware of?
So in marketing, and I know you and I share a marketing background. I was there when the internet was born. Maybe you were too. Like, do you remember the early days of website
I
development?
did. I went to college. Well, I was, I was born in '83, but when I went to college, I did a marketing degree in business school, but there wasn't any online marketing. Websites were like digital brochures, and yeah, there was some Google ads, but no one really, we just had it up, and that was it. And so I had to teach myself how to build websites and Google ads and all of that from the ground up. So yes, I remember fairly as
You remember it, and you
social. I was so happy.
yeah, and you remember the feeling like it was everything was possible, right? I feel the same way today, looking at this intersection of AI tools that are constantly changing, and there's something new coming every day. So I think the challenge will be not so much the access to the tools. I often describe AI like a hammer. It's a tool you can hit your head with, or you can build something beautiful with. And so the utility of that tool, there's still a conscious choice of what you want to do. So I think the challenge for people will be refining the craftsmanship of how you use that tool, but also being able to filter out which tools are the best ones. And there'll be a proliferation of so many tools, and people will need to be able to filter better. People will need to be able to critically examine and assess, and also think with like privacy and governance in mind. So for me, the tool and the challenges with the tool will come challenges of filtering and processing and analyzing them. Like there's no rating system. Like, is it just thumbs up, thumbs down on a tool? Show me a rating system for new tools that are coming out. And then like maybe then we're getting somewhere. So I think that'll be a challenge. The second will be one that Maria Ressa wrote a lot about, which I encourage in anybody who is interested in technology, but the intersection of rights and voices and liberty and democracy. Because again, algorithms can be curated, tools can be biased if trained with biased data. So she writes at length about the need for governance and the need for putting in the digital version of a stop sign or the digital AI version of lanes. Like, so we will need more of those. And right now it's just kind of Wild West. And that's kind of the early feeling of the internet that I remember. It was really Wild West, and it never really got reined in terms of ratings or there's some privacy controls and content controls, but really people know ways around all of that. So for me, I think the need for that will be the other growing area that we'll need to pay attention to, especially those of us who have young people in our lives. There's scientific studies now that prove technology has messed up and changed brain development in children. And that's not, I don't think that's a future that any of us want generally, although there maybe are some bad actors in the world who might think otherwise. And I think the other challenge that, or the other trend that I see, will be a need for not just tools to manage the tools. So do you remember in the early days, you'd have like a CRM system, and then you'd have another system, and then you have another system. And so for business owners, for enterprises who are operating on clunky, old school tools that have built over the years, I think the real tool will be the one that can orchestrate seamlessly across, whatever the baseline of gold
Oh,
starts.
that's what we do, especially I'm gonna do, like we call it technology transformation. And
Mhm.
in most companies, it's shocking. They have over, especially enterprise, they have over 100 pieces of software. And that, so just by doing a discovery and an audit, we immediately, even on smaller companies, and can between 1,500 and up to $100,000 a month, we can cut out from redundancies and doing just that. So you're
Yeah, you got it. You got it. And I think that the challenge ultimately will be, are you going to place more investment into those tools and the tool stack, or are you going to put more investment into building up human-based qualities and values that will allow you to do the critical thinking and the relationship building and all of these skills that are coming up differently in young people today because they are learning differently than maybe we were, and they're working differently and their tools are different. They have different hammers. It's not even a hammer. It's
And then I wanted to ask you something. So the brought about like a cult, these different privacy rules. I'm a very big proponent on global privacy and protection. But just the other day, I had someone on the podcast, and it was Lauren, and she specialized in social media, and she was telling me about some new requirements, right, for some people in other countries, right?
yeah.
And where it trickled down after some discussion was that a lot of Filipino call centers are now being let go of because they're handling calls that would be for someone in EU, and that now doesn't qualify for the GDRP compliance. And I thought, wow, like that's the kind of experience where we think it's protecting it's protecting maybe our customer, or the European Union thinks it's protecting theirs, but at what cost, right? Because now it's impacting other people's ability to do great work, right? What are your
Yeah, and the call center business in the Philippines, and I know this from personal connection, it sustains a growing middle class
thoughts?
in what is still very much an impoverished nation of 100 million people. The call center industry has has created a middle class in the Philippines. So I can imagine the impact without that as a result of GDRP. And I expect other legislations. But let's talk about that for a second, too, because even in Canada, they've introduced questionable bills that are old school thinking to a new school multiverse, right? And maybe the GDRP is an example of that. In Canada, it's called PEPIDA, which is the privacy law here. But like the legislations haven't kept up with the rate of industry, right? And that's also where I sometimes pause and have friends in government who'll be like, "Hey, well, we need younger people in government to have informed opinions on these things." And in Canada recently, with a change of government, you can see the average age of politicians going down. You see more diversity, but is that happening everywhere? Is that happening in the US? Is that happening in the EU? I really admired, what was happening in Australia because they were the first to take Google on directly, right? And Canada followed suit. But like, these are all the things that governments and the bills or legislations that they have may not be fast enough for the rate of change that the
And
industry.
is that like, almost they're just targeting, right? It's like, okay, because they're in the Philippines, now all of a sudden, if they see the data is now not secure. Well, what makes you say that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, and then that's like, be parting of a global community. There's so many things that trickle over, like every product you buy, oh, it touched someone in China. Are you now going to, well, I guess here, we have problems with that and tariffs, but I think it's not like a global mindset. And we have to find a way to come together to really get to the essence of what it really means, like why is it so bad? And like, can we use servers and other ways to mitigate can, but it's rampant and it's only gonna get worse.
Yeah, so if I can be optimistic, because I know it's hard to be optimistic on, I like to say I'm Joycelyn, I'm full of joy. I like to look at the glass half full. But there are some days where I look at it and say, shit, how did we get here? And this is partially why I wanted to also express as much as I could in the book and talk about the return to um in real life cultural fluency that is deeper than surface level, that goes beyond skin color, that allows people to get past the fear factor. I have a lot of amazing colleagues and friends who are afraid of saying or afraid of acting on because of either policy or government. And this is obviously the trend that we need to fight against. And the way to do that is by building up your own bravery. And how do you get brave? By having more knowledge. And how can you gain more knowledge and experience? And that goes right back to what I call the multicultural mindset, which is kind of a loaded word. Did you know that multiculturalism was first created into policy in Canada in 1973?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
We were the first country in the world to adopt multiculturalism as a federal government policy. So I'm a product of that policy. My parents are products of the immigration policies I came after. And ultimately, today is still one of the most multicultural nations in the world. And there's a multicultural country index that I have in the book as well. And countries like Australia are high up on that, along with Canada, and countries like the US are not. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of policy at a federal level. And my hope is that conversations around multiculturalism will continue because I believe it's been beneficial to me growing up in Canada. I believe it's been beneficial to Canada overall. And I hope that people can learn from my learnings that I share in the book. But more importantly, Canada's got what, 50 years, even more so, 50 plus years of this as policy that we can learn from. So why not?
Well, and I think that I think about that a lot, actually. With the step backwards we've been making in America, and really how leadership, it's now it becomes like, what is a true leader? How are you really going to stand up? Because now you're being told almost that not even you don't have to. If you do, well, you might not get funding if you're a university, or you might, potentially lose your job. And it's like, wow, so we're going to really unravel everything, and we know it's easy to take things down. It's not so easy to put them back up. So what are your tips for businesses who, maybe now are going through some of this? I know you're not in America, but are there things that, as a leader that you can do to kind of be an inspiration without putting your neck too out there?
Yeah, I definitely can talk to a few things on that, Anna. Uh, for my American friends and clients who are feeling like, what can I do? What should I do? Uh, I always harken back to the point that the tone at the top will change eventually, but the tone at the bottom, which is your customers and the community that you serve and you live, they are looking for authenticity. They are looking to be seen, heard, and understood. And brands and companies who see, understand, and hear them, who hire them, who market to them, who really understand and connect with them, those are the ones that are going to have brand loyalty. Those are the ones who are going to succeed in the future. And I really firmly stand behind that notion. Now, what can they do is quietly keep building and quietly keep connecting. What some of my clients are doing are reframing DEI and diversity into, different programs with different labels and different names. It still has the spirit of inclusion, localization, community, different times, different words, but the spirit is still the same. And so my advice has always been The work doesn't end because the tone at the top is different. But what you can do is be smart about the positioning, be prudent about the long term, and more than anything, remember what puts money in in the pocket and in the bank, is the majority. And multicultural populations are the majority in a lot of the markets. And to ignore them, to disenfranchise them, is actually bad business. And period. Which is why all the narrative happening now in LA and in other markets now, where you now see American citizens standing up for their neighbors to say, well, yeah, I work in construction and 50% of my teammates are Latino. Like, what am I going to do if you deport all of them?
I mean,
These
even
are
for students that like, they're up at getting graduate diplomas. I mean, that was just heart-wrenching.
heartbreaking. I
What do
know.
you do with these people? I mean, like they can't just drop them off. They're not really from Mexico anymore. They've grown up in America.
Yeah, and it's becoming obviously, it's the tone and tenor has changed quite a bit, even just in the last 48 hours of time of this recording, Anna. But I genuinely believe that the companies who outlast this are the ones who'll be looking in the long term, and the long term trends that I share in the book, the numbers don't lie. The population, the rate of growth of population, the spending power and the buying power are all multicultural consumers who have lived or worked outside of the continental USA or Canada. And those are the communities that want to be seen, heard, and and those are the ones that we need to not forget. So that's what I would say to my American friends and clients is, look at the numbers and let that build your business case and continue to reframe how you talk about these things with each other, have difficult conversations with each other. I got into a very heated argument the other day with a client who was like, well, Joycelyn, I can't continue to invest in this because we're a public American company and it's just not the right thing that we should be doing right now because, I'm worried for my job, etc. So I'm not going to push that, of course, but I just said, when the time is right for you to come back, of course, we'll be here. But just keep in mind, your competition can close that gap.
That's
To
right.
share a voice, at a time of need, this is the time. This is the
It's
time.
time to double down on your budget.
You got it. Double, double, just like a
Double,
Canadian coffee, double, double. So, and in that case, I didn't win that conversation, but I understand, and want to be supportive of that as well.
Well, thanks so much for being here today. This was a very fantastic conversation. And to learn more about Joycelyn, you can visit her at joycelyndavid.co. She's also on LinkedIn, and make sure to pick up a copy of her best-selling book on Amazon. It's also, I'm guessing Barnes and Noble. Do you have that in Canada? Where else is it? Barnes and Noble, Target,
And Chapters Indigo in Canada.
Chapters Indigo. Great. Well, thanks so much for being here. And to all my guests, please join me next week as I interview another industry expert in a topic to help you succeed on and offline. Aloha, and I'll see you in the pixels. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Covert Code podcast. To stay up to date with all our future episodes, follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means everything to us. Please take a moment to leave a review and share our content with your friends and colleagues on social media. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more digital innovators like yourself. See you in the pixels. Aloha.